Okay, so Endwalker is almost at the end of its patch cycle. At the time of recording, we're just a few weeks away from Dawn Trail, so I thought I would talk about what the fishing was like in Endwalker and kind of just start from the beginning and go to where we are now. Consider this kind of just me rambling and, well, kind of structurally rambling on just fishing in general in Final Fantasy XIV, specifically through the lens of the changes made in Endwalker, the fish in Endwalker, and just generally basically what it's been like for the past 2 years. I'm not going to be doing a ton of heavy editing on this. It is going to just be probably a straight cut. I don't know how long this is going to take. There will be no visuals on screen, except whatever I've decided to put up. So if you want to just throw this on in the background and go like fish in the diadem or whatever, go right on ahead. There will be no visuals. You can just chill out. So anyways, for those who don't know, my name is Fruity Snacks. I am a fisher in Final Fantasy XIV, one of the fisher mains, I guess would be the way to put it. I am a moderator on the Fishcord, and I make guides on this channel that you are probably watching it on, or listening to this on, and all about Final Fantasy XIV fishing. So that's kind of my really quick background. And let's get started. I wanted to start with the beginning, which is basically Endwalker's launch back on, December 2nd, no, December 21st, 2nd, whatever, doesn't matter. Back in 2021, we got a bunch of changes to Fisher. And some of these skills, I have the patch notes up right now. These skills included Thaliac's Favor, which used Angler's Arts, which was a new trait that we got, where whenever we got a large-sized fish, or whenever we got a large-sized fish, or speared a large-sized fish, there was a chance to get an Angler's Arts stack. We would get one of these stacks. You can get a maximum of 10, and then you could use them on skills like Thaliac's Favor, which granted 150 GP for 3 Angler's Art stacks, Makeshift Bait, which costs 5 stacks, and let you mooch average size fish, and I'll talk about Makeshift Bait a ton more in a little bit. And then we got into spearfishing with Vital Sight, Baited Breath, Electric Current at level 85, and Triple Hook. And then at 81, we got Prize Catch. There was a couple of other traits too as well beyond just Angler's Arts, which was Enhanced GP Regeneration 3, which gave us 8 GP per tick. 9. I should have checked that beforehand, but that's been in the past few expansions anyway, so that was expected. And then Starfishing, obviously. So these new skills with Angler's Arts was really quite exciting, because now Fisher was moved farther away from Botanist and Miner as a gathering job, and given its own like secondary resource it has to manage through Angler's Arts. And then we had to expend those Angler's Arts on skills like Thaliac's Favor, which restored GP, and Makeshift Bait, which basically acted as Patience 2. And this was really kind of big because now it added an additional layer of preparation for fish. When you're going for big fish, what you do before the window is just as important as what you do during the window. And Angler's Arts added this one additional layer of, do I need to get Angler's Arts stacks? Is it going to benefit me to have them? And it was actually quite interesting to think about for a lot of these fish was, do I need to show up like 10 minutes before a window and get 10 Angler's Arts stacks? Actually, I think it's closer to 7, because you would just use Patience 2. You would, that would give you usually 5 per Patience 2 duration. Sometimes 6, sometimes 7, depending on the window and the length of the fish. But on average, it's about 5. So that's roughly 5-6 minutes worth of time, plus letting your GP regen. So you had to really think like, hey, am I going to need Angler's Arts to be more efficient with this? And a lot of the time you didn't, which kind of became a bit of a bummer, at least for Endwalker fish. I should say this is specifically looking at Endwalker fish. Despite Angler's Arts being added in Endwalker and being a core part of skills in the Fisher's kit, I didn't really feel like we needed them a whole lot in Endwalker. There was a lot of fish where, yeah, you could show up to like a Lail crab window, which is the big fish in the Bay of Yelimad. And I'm going to botch some of these names, I'm sorry. You don't necessarily need 10 Angler's Art stacks to really just fish there. You would have gotten away with the other big thing that was added for Fisher, which was obviously the new gear. And Fisher, because we have a spearfishing gig and just the way that our melds work, we were able to break 1,000 GP like relatively quickly into the expansion. I don't think it wasn't the first set of gear. I think it was the second. Definitely by the end, we were able to have 1,000 GP, which is a lot. A lot of our skills and some of the changes that were made to these skills didn't really scale with that GP increase. So we saw Chum get reduced down to 100 GP plus its level was lowered, so I'm not too surprised by that. Patience 2 didn't have its GP changed at all. Like the biggest hit to your GP now is Triple Hook, which is 700, Fish Eyes, which is 550, or Patience 2, which is 560. So because we had this expanded pool, we had a whole lot more that we could do and a whole lot more wiggle room on these fish. And these new skills, especially with Angler's Arts and Thaliac's Favor, really extended that GP pool out. So you could show up to a window. Say we'll use ocean fishing as an example. Ocean fishing. Going into ocean fishing, you have 1,000 GP. During the first zone, you get say 10 Angler's Art stacks. With that, you're able to use double hook, prize catch, identical cast, and triple hook with everything else that we have, which would have been you would have been able to use Thaliac's Favor 3 times, and then a high cordial for another 400. Between all of that, you have enough GP that you could do double hook, prize catch, and identical cast into triple hook, which can lead to some ridiculously high points in ocean fishing. If you take out the prize catch for some fish that would require like we'll say Cinder Surprise requires 10 sand eggs, for triple hook, identical cast, and triple hook, you can get 6 sand eggs in 30 seconds, which back in Shadowbringers, that might have taken you a few minutes because you could have only double hooked and then, because triple hook didn't exist, but you would have only had to double hook and go into identical cast and double hook again, which would have only have given you 4. So a lot of these skills made fishing a whole lot easier right at the outset of Endwalker. I think somebody in the fish court, I think it was either Caducer, Cad, or Cavanessa, said that the Endwalker kit was probably one of the best things that could have happened for all the fish that came before Endwalker. I mean, we saw makeshift bait was a huge nerf, I would say, to Ruby Dragon. It's still a rare fish, but it made it a whole lot easier and a whole lot more accessible. Then same thing for Stethacanthus. Anything that was heavy mooching. So you saw ruby, steth, charbonnet, sea butterfly, rhomdelopterus, warden of the seven hues. Basically any heavy mooching fish. Anything that's like a mooch chain, Shonosaurus, because makeshift bait's at level 48. So now all the level 50 fishers can use makeshift bait on all of the A Realm Reborn legendaries. It makes it a whole lot more approachable, makes it a whole lot more easier, and you get that trade-off of if you're doing it earlier or you have a smaller GP pool, you don't have to, you don't have as much strictness, I think is the word I want to use. It's not as strict of GP management, which when we saw this, we were like, cool, all these older fish got easier to catch, as is tradition. We expected that. We've seen that before. Like in Shadowbringers, they added Surface Slap and Identical Cast. Surface Slap was probably like the biggest skill to Fisher's kit at the time. Trivialized fish like Unconditional and Moggle Mogpom, and the one in Hermit's End that I can't remember. And a bunch of other fish as well. Surface Slap has become a staple skill. But that's all the old fish. When we saw this new kit, we were like, dang, Fisher in Endwalker is the most powerful that it has ever been. And then the fish came, and we never really used it. And I'm going to get to that in a minute, but that was kind of teasing you. I'll tease you for what I want to talk about soon. A lot of the skills were great. I think the Endwalker kit was a really good addition for big fishing and just overworld fishing in general. But I think there were some utilization issues that I'll get to in a bit, because what I want to talk about next is the spearfishing rework, which also came in Endwalker. This came out of nowhere, and for those who don't know how old spearfishing worked, it was a lot like mining and botany, except you couldn't pick what you were going to gather. And it was a bit of a timing thing where you'd go to a node, there's a bunch of bubbles, and whenever the bubbles were active, you'd press gig and you could catch the fish, but you had no idea what fish it was going to be. You had, basically it was pure random. There was skills like Identical Gig, which would let you catch the same, or gig the same fish again, or Veteran Trade, which works like it does now, where it would just remove it from the pool of fish that you could catch. The new spearfishing rework was absolutely amazing. I think it was a huge improvement for spearfishing in general, and I think it made spearfishing a whole lot more engaging and a whole lot more interesting to do. And it gave us, with this update, they also added Spearfisher's Intuition, which is another triggerable event, I guess would be the way to put it, for spearfishing. And we saw the Tebkek Smelt as the first Spearfisher's Int, which was added in patch 6.0. It was a collectible. I think Spearfisher's Intuition was great, and with the change, because each fish had a unique size and a unique speed, we started to see a lot of similarities between spearfishing and above ground fishing, which made it a whole lot easier for people who have done only, say, overworld or above ground fishing to get into spearfishing, because now we can say, if you want to catch a Tebkek Smelt, it's during the intuition, it's the smallest size and it's the fastest fish in the fishing hole. Compared to beforehand, we would have had to say, yeah, just try and catch it. There was no way to identify it. And so adding that identification, really rewarding knowledge, on top of reflexes now with spearfishing, I think was a really good move, and I'm really excited. I was really excited to see what else they were going to do with spearfishing. And as I was alluding to beforehand, with overworld fishing, didn't seem to really pan out. At least, I don't want to say that it didn't. I don't want to say that the spearfishing rework long term was bad. The spearfishing rework is great. Long term, it stood up. I think the issue was in Endwalker, they set fishers up for these crazy new skill combos that you could use, like utilizing the makeshift bait and patience combo, where you could effectively get, what would have been like? So I'm doing math in my head here. It's 3 times 145. So about, what is that, 6 minutes, 45 seconds? We'll say roughly 7 minutes of the ability to do perpetual looping at minimum, not assuming you get any other Angler's Art stacks to continue with that on for another minute or another 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. It's the expectation at the start of launch, or at the start of Endwalker, was there's a lot that we're going to be able to do with these skills. It's going to be great. Endwalker fishing, they're giving us so many opportunities, specifically for mooching, because we have prize catch, which is really useful for fish like Xenacanthus. I used it a lot for sidereal whale and Garliacthus. And basically like single mooch fish, excellent with prize catch. Multi-mooch fish, great with makeshift bait. Ruby Dragon got a complete meta change on how you approach it with makeshift bait. Same thing with Stethecanthus. And then the same thing came up with, like I was saying, with Spearfish's Intuition, we have this really cool idea of you have to trigger Intuition within this time frame and still catch the fish. And that really added a ton of fun. And not only did it just add more engagement to fishing, but it also added that little bit of a skill aspect, I guess would be the word, to fishing in general, because now you had to have that physical reflex to be able to actually catch and be able to time your gigging to actually be able to catch the fish. So, yeah, to kind of sum up that whole section, the start of Endwalker, a lot of fishers were really hopeful and really kind of expecting a really wild expansion of fish, because we had all these crazy new skills. We had Angler's Art new resources. We had Spearfisher's Intuition. We had a way to continue a mooch chain without breaking the mooch, because you can't use Patience 2 back to back to continue a mooch chain, but you can with makeshift bait. Prize catch allowed for new options with a whole bunch of single mooch fish. Like, there was a whole lot of new toys that we could play with that made fishing a whole lot more interesting, especially for those who aren't necessarily already fishing, which means we're going to see a lot of new people. And that didn't end up happening. We did see a lot of new fishers because of these skills join the community, but that was all at launch. Moving forward, we got our first set of big fish in patch 6.1. I could not tell you off the top of my head which ones they were. But in general, we got these big fish on, all the major patches, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, etc., etc. And of the 40 big fish and legendary fish that were added in Endwalker, there are about 2 non-legendary fish that, to me, were really well done. And that would have been Cosmic Haze, which is a personal favorite of mine, and Durdina fish, which is by many considered to actually be the true legend the true legendary fish of Thavnair instead of Garliacthus, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Cosmic Haze and Durdina fish are both mooch fish. They're both in fishing holes that are, I wouldn't say they're polluted, but they do have a lot of similar biting fish, but not so similar that if you did your research, you looked at the fish, you really kind of applied knowledge to catching this fish, you would have a whole lot better chance than somebody who doesn't. And they also really utilized the new kit that we got really well. We were able to utilize, for Cosmic Haze, we kind of developed this new technique called surface slap cycling. That's it. Where you slap one fish, which means you can confidently catch another fish based on time and bite type. Slap that, and then you can guarantee the fish you want. And I have a couple of videos. If you go and look at the guide on Cosmic Haze, I explain slap cycling. I apologize for the mishaps here. I'm going to be talking for a while. And because we had this new set of skills and this new expanded GP pool, we could use surface slap more. It enabled slap cycling to the point where it's actually what I recommend doing now for ambling caltrop, which is a Shadowbringers fish. We couldn't have really effectively done this in Shadowbringers with the GP pool and the skills we had, because with ambling caltrop, we would have had to have used surface slap and patience too, to reliably get the mooches and to be able to reliably target fish the web-footed sand geckos to mooch into ambling caltrop. We just didn't have the GP for it. But now that we have like minimum 950 up to 1,000 GP, plus makeshift bait, which means we don't need to spend GP on patience, we can do a whole lot more with those side skills like surface slap and chum and prize catch even. And so Cosmic Haze was one of the first fish, and it came out, it wasn't a 6.1 fish, I think it was like 6.3, 6.2. I didn't bring that up and I didn't put that in front of me. It was one of the first fish that actually really, to me, utilized the kit, the new skills added to Endwalker, and really made you think about the fish and also use all of these new skills to their fullest, to their fullest. When it came to Durdina fish, which was added in 6.5, it's caught on the Thavnarian coast, and it in itself is a huge strategy, and I know Teota Teyun considers this like the best fish, one of the best fish in Endwalker, and there's so much that you can do with Durdina fish to improve getting deep shadowed sardines, which you mooch into Durdina fish. There's so much that you can do with the skills that it becomes really fun. It becomes so engaging. Cosmic Haze and Durdina were very engaging fish, and we didn't have a lot of engaging fish in Endwalker until the legendaries, which I'll get to in a second again. I think that's kind of the big letdown in a way of Endwalker fishing, is a lot of these fish weren't super duper engaging. And not like, when I say engaging, I don't mean difficult. I don't mean confusingly intricate. I'm not saying that an engaging fish has to have like a 3-page guide on it or a 20-minute guide on how to catch it. Engaging is just, I'm using a lot more of my skills besides surface slap and chum, which we saw a lot of those fish. I mean, we had like brown banana eel, which is slippery. That's fun. That was, brown banana eel is one of the most slippery fish in Endwalker, and that was a ton of fun. I mean, I enjoyed brown banana eel, but it was just, you show up, you slap half moon baiter or radsbellic, and then you just chum cast. Not very engaging. It's something you can watch a podcast or listen to a podcast with, or watch a video while fishing. There was Maya Man, which was another its prep is engaging because you have to figure out how to catch all of the Thavnarian caimans in time to be able to trigger, and there's a few avenues to do that, and you can use the skills that we added, like makeshift bait can be very handy with Maya Man, but once you actually have the intuition, it just goes back to surface slap and chum and just going over and over again. And so it loses its half engaging. Like the prep for Maya Man, great. Everything else after that, nah. And so I think that was kind of like the one thing that a lot of fishermains, at least, myself included, found to be a little bit of a letdown. Realistically, in my mind, it makes sense that this is what happened, because in Shadowbringers, we saw this huge revolution in fishing because of the addition of ocean fishing, which made fishing significantly easier to level, a ton more fun to level, and it just added a fun fishing minigame. Like ocean fishing was, I think, a gateway to a lot of big fishers in Shadowbringers. Then there was the Diadem rankings, which after the first actual rankings, I think Fisher really took off because people were like, wow, Fisher can get 250,000 points a day, compared to all the other ones, which were lucky to break, maybe 100. And we could do 100 no sweat. So a lot of people were looking at fishing that way. The skills made it a little bit more fun, a little bit more easier to access fishing in general, especially big fishing. And so with this huge population of people moving into fishing in Shadowbringers, it makes sense to me that they wanted to take this new population of fishers and not immediately scare them away. I think if we were seeing more fish like Cosmic Haze, more fish like Durdina fish, more fish like Ruby Dragon, Stethacanthus, Duskfish, Bob Goblin Bass, Deep Haunt. I'm naming all these fish, and if you don't know fishing, this might not be as clear. But basically, Endwalker didn't have the super rare downtime big fish. It didn't, like Bob Goblin Bass or Deep Haunt or Duskfish. It didn't have the crazy slippery intuition fish or the just mooch fish like Madam Butterfly or Armor Fish. It had just a lot of very basic big fish. And I think for the broad stroke, what we know about Endwalker now, they were trying to make it a little less stressful, trying to focus more on short-term content. It makes sense. I think that actually was probably the best decision. I think that there are ways that they could have done it a little better. I personally think a lot of these fish could still be engaging and approachable for newer fishers. But I understand the decision if that was, kind of the conscious decision to be like, let's make these fish a little bit easier so that we don't immediately scare off all these people who just decided to level Fisher. So I think that's kind of my concern. Concern's probably not the right word. My critique, I guess, would be the way, around Endwalker fishing was, for somebody who has been fishing for a little while, and I'll admit, I started really hardcore fishing in Shadowbringers for the Diadem, but I was doing fishing a bit before that. But for somebody who spends so much time fishing, didn't really land well for me. But I am like a very, very small percent of a already small niche of the community. So I think to address the broader fishing community and just a broader game, it was probably the right decision to go that route. But that said, I still think that they could have made some slightly more engaging fish, and I really think that they could have done that through just mooching more. Our kits really are strong for our fishing kit, that is really strong specifically around mooching. And so I think having more mooching, like moochable fish, would have been a whole lot more engaging. And it would have been beneficial to the new fishers as well, because it would have started introducing them to these newer mechanics as well. Which is, I think, another critique I have. But also maybe it's not really a critique. It's more of just a commentary of, we saw with like the Relic, the Splendorous Tools Relic, we started to see, basic slap and chum, then mooch, and then in the final step, we had an intuition fish. We hadn't had a non-legendary intuition fish since A Realm Reborn, at least, maybe Heaven's Word, I can't remember off the top of my head, but definitely A Realm Reborn. Maya Man was the first big fish to have an intuition that wasn't a legendary fish in years. And I think this build up through the Splendorous Rod, and towards the end of Endwalker with adding, Maya Man and Durdina fish towards the end, I think there was that slight uptick in, okay, community, let's start testing you here. Let's see if you actually, let's see how this works. See if you know what you need to know. And my personal hope is we're going to see more engaging fish going into Dawn Trail, because they were introducing slowly those different mechanics to the game, to the fishing community, just naturally, so that there's that expectation now that, maybe in 7.1 or 7.2 we have an intuition fish that's a big fish that isn't legendary. Maybe we have a intuition like collectible fish. Like, imagine if Felena or Sculptor or Barrel Eye, imagine if they were all intuition based. I think that there's that opportunity. Do I expect it? Truthfully, not really. But I think the community is ready to be able to hold on to those types of fish and be able to succeed in catching those and actually find enjoyment in that. Okay, so it's been a couple minutes since I ended whatever I was just saying. And I wanted to move into talking about the legendary fish for Endwalker. And those legendary fish were Snowy Paraxis, Furcaquata, I can't remember, I blanked all of a sudden, Garliacthus, Lopoceros elegans, Hyphlosaurus, and everyone's new favorite, not really, Sidereal Whale. So the legendaries, were all discovered within 48 hours or thereabouts, which is a new record for any legendary discovery thus far. Admittedly, going into it, some of the like myself and a few other hardcore fishers were kind of expecting this to be a quick discovery period for legendaries because all the other fish in the expansion were found relatively quickly. We later learned that that is partially due to luck. Sidereal whale and Garliacthus both can have some pretty notable downtime, and so I think we just got really lucky in that they were launched when they had a bunch of windows up, and I think that kind of was a big attribute to why it took so little time to actually find them all. But we did get a couple of interesting fish with the legendaries, and I think I'll get back to this a little bit. It was a bit of a hockey puck, or a hockey stick, sorry. A bit of a hockey stick moment in difficulty, I think. We had spent all this time with Endwalker really with low-key big fish. Even looking at it from like looking at it as like a pseudo-casual fisher, a lot of these fish were really pretty much like definitely like casual fish. Didn't have a ton of prep work needed, they weren't super intricate. And then we got these legendaries, and some of these are like some of the longest guides I've had to write. Some of them are some of the most intricate. I don't want to say they're the most intricate, actually, but they definitely were not a step up. You kind of needed to jump and or use a step ladder to get up to the level of some of these fish. In terms of optimization, in terms of actual approach, well, let me talk about them specifically. So starting with Lopoceros elegans, this was found in the Chlorophoss pond on Mare Lamentorum. This was the first fish, I believe, that was found, the first legendary fish. It is a straight catch using Chimera worm, and it's a very slippery fish, which was cool. We've had slippery legendaries in the past, like intentionally slippery and common biting. Unconditional is the one that kind of stood out. This felt a lot like a unconditional for the modern world. You could not isolate it now with surface slap. You unless they add like multiple fish surface slap, which is a whole other discussion in itself. You would need to remove the ability to remove 3 fish from the pool to get Lopoceros elegans as a guaranteed bite, which I don't think will happen in Dawntrail. So it was kind of future-proof in that sense, and it wasn't the longest bite in the hole, which is nice. So you have that. You need to have the knowledge to be a little bit more optimized. But overall, it was an okay fish. It was, we looked at it, and I know my personal opinion was, yeah, that's a legendary fish. That's fine. That works. It doesn't have crazy downtime. Doesn't have crazy uptime. It's just slippery. Bites often enough. It might take you still a few windows, but it's there. You're focused. You're engaged in that window for 6 minutes or 9. I can't remember now. Crap. 6 minutes. And it's an engaging fish. It works, and if I was to rate it, I would rate it not super high, but also it wouldn't be bad. Then we got Furca Kawada, which is basically just considered Aelid Scan 2.0. Slightly better uptime. Well, much better uptime, I should say, than Aelid Scan, because it has a split window. So I don't I'm thinking back to other legendaries, and I don't think we've ever had a split window legendary. And a split window is basically the weather transitions to a new set of weather at 8 a.m., then 4 p.m., and then midnight in game. And for Kawada, its window straddles that 4 p.m. time. So it's either going to be 3:30 to 4 or 4 to 4:30, depending on when the umbral wind is. So if you show up to Elpis and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Eorzean time, and it's umbral wind, Furka Kawada is going to bite from 3:30 to 4. If you show up and it is not umbral wind, but you know the window's coming up, I believe it's like Fair Skies, then it's going to be from 4 to 4:30, whenever the umbral wind starts versus when it ends. So that was interesting. It's a bit of a rarer bite than I was expecting. I think that was kind of how they balanced it a little bit, was they made it have higher uptime, but less of a bite rate than Aelidskan, and Aelidskan already had a pretty wild bite rate to begin with. So after Furka Kawada, there was Hyphlosaurus, which is an intuition fish. It's the first legendary intuition fish I'm talking about, of those that are left. And Hyphlosaurus felt a lot like Sea Butterfly in a way. You can get multiple intuitions per window, which is great. You can, with knowledge and and a little bit of idea of what's in the fishing hole, a little bit of just observation. This is not something you would actually have to look up. You could figure this out yourself. After a window or two, the intuition trigger is isolatable, so you could efficiently use your GP to get the intuition. You utilize the skills of like makeshift bait to actually be able to mooch and continue to mooch, because there's technically a mooch loop in there, and it's in my opinion, it's an underrated legendary. I don't think it is as difficult or as intricate as, say, Sea Butterfly or Charbonnet specifically. I think it feels closer to, I forget if I said if it was like a Sea Butterfly or not, but really Hyphlosaurus feels closer to like a Rhomdelopterus type fish, where the optimization lies in being able to chain your intuitions together, so you have less downtime in between intuition triggers, and you can get the most uptime of intuition during its window. So next up would have been, let's see what I did, Mare Lamentorum. And for those who don't know, legendary fish, there's one in each zone. So I've done Mare Lamentorum, I have done Labyrinthos, and I have done Elpis. Then we have Snowy Paraxis, which would have been in Garlemald. Snowy Paraxis, straight up, is probably my most favorite fish conceptually, added in the entire expansion. Snowy Paraxis has a 23-minute window, but a 30-second intuition. So you are getting 6, 7, 8 if you're lucky, 9 if you're really lucky, intuitions per window. And I think a fish that lets you be able to get a fish that you can catch and trigger intuition for multiple times in a single window is really fun. And I think the really short 30-second intuition with these long uptimes really creates a different approach to how you attack this fish basically, because when we got Snowy Praxis and the intuition was discovered, I believe, by a friend of mine named Zin, we were like, oh, it's only 30 seconds and it's 3 cerule cores. That sounds a whole lot like ocean fishing. And it was. It felt like they were like, okay, well, we like the spectral current fish. We like stone scale, or it's probably closest to Elasmosaurus. We like these fish. Let's see what happens if we do it in the overworld. And so basically for 23 minutes during a Snowy Praxis window, you have like a 23-minute spectral current without the increased the increased reel rate. And that was a ton of fun. I think the first time it took me to catch Snowy Praxis, it took me about 80 intuitions, which sounds like a ton. I mean, you come up to somebody and go, how many intuitions has it taken you to until you got your first catch? And you're like, 80. And the other person looks at you like you're mad. Like, what have you been doing wrong? But for Snowy Praxis, 80 intuitions, 30 seconds, I mean, that's 40 minutes worth of time across only 10 windows, which for some legendaries is actually pretty good. But for me, I think that just long term, as of beginning of June at the end of Endwalker, 80 intuitions is a little bit on the high end. Most people seem to get it between 50 and 60 is kind of the rough number that I'm hearing. Sometimes 40, but it's usually like that. So it's really, really a dynamic fish, and there's a few different ways that you can approach it. There's different strategies. It's just that it doesn't bite super often, because you really only get you can get 3, but usually you should definitely be getting roughly 3, and closer to an average of 3 casts per intuition. It just doesn't seem to bite all that often. It does slip occasionally. It doesn't have a high slip rate. I think Snowy Praxis could be improved a little bit if they just made it bite more often, but slipped like in a proportionally higher way. So that way you really had that back and forth feel of, oh, I got you, you got away, we're going to do this again. And because you could just immediately wait for that intuition to go out, cast back out, get it again, and do it multiple times a window. So you really have this like back and forth tug of war feeling with this fish. And I think that might have made Snowy a little bit more interesting. But as it is, I am actually like really, really happy with how Snowy Praxis looks and feels as a fish. I think it's a very interesting fish, and I think it's a very, personally, I find it a very fun fish to go for, of all the legendaries. If I had to rank the Endwalker legendary fish, Snowy Praxis is probably up there, if not at the top of like best, most interesting legendary fish. And then we move over into Thavnair with Garliacthus. Garliacthus was another fish that really started to show that you had to actually be able to use this kit now. It's one of those few fish where you're like, okay, I actually need to use the full kit. And the intuition for Garliacthus was 12 Basilosauruses, which Basilosaurus, as of patch 6.4, when Basilosaurus Rex was added, mooch into each other, creating a mooch loop, which you can chain together to really basically make it easier to get the 12 that you need. And you can use triple hook, double hook, makeshift bait to manage your GP to make that quick. And you have, if you don't show up early to prep basils in like an earlier window, so you don't have that much pressure, you can get 12 in the it's about probably 17 minutes or so, 18 minutes, until Garliacthus window opens, because it opens at the end of the Fair Skies window in Thavnir from 14 to 16, or that would be 2 in the afternoon to 4 in the afternoon. I think what kind of makes Garliacthus a little less exciting to me personally is Collector's Glove holding. It's because Basilosaurus is a collectible, you can turn on Collector's Glove, triple hook a Basilosaurus, and then you get the pop-up, and it says, do you want to collect this as a collectible? This will be the rating, etc., etc., etc. And if you sit there and wait, your GP ticks up and your cooldowns keep ticking. Which means for this fish you can mooch, you can hold on to this until you're back to full GP or whatever you need, and all of your cooldowns, like on Mooch 2 or High Cordial, are there, are back. And if you press no on the collectibles, you will get 3 Basilosaurus if you triple hook it. If you double hook it, you'll get 2. It's the same thing with Stethocanthus and Sculptors. This is how we hold Sculptors until the Stethocanthus window, or at least an hour later until a more ideal Stethocanthus window. You can basically use Collect or Collector's Glove to hold to get the ideal conditions. So you can chain that to get the 12 Basilosaurus you need, assuming you don't get a Basilosaurus Rex, which I think is the one thing that makes it a little interesting and actually makes Collector's Glove holding for Garliacthus, in my opinion, actually a little bit more risky than it sounds. If Basilosaurus Rex wasn't there, Collector's Glove holding would be easy peasy. That would make Garliacthus like super duper easy to trigger, the int to trigger. But because Rex is there, you have a chance to fall out of that loop. I mean, you can also fall out of it just by a slip on either the Rex or the Basilosaurus. And because Rex and Basil overlap so much, there's a risk that you might be like, oh, this is definitely a Basilosaurus, and you're like, no, it's an early Rex, and you get pulled out, and then you have to go back into that mooch loop. You have to find a Puffpaya. You then have to have that Puffpaya mooch into a Basilosaurus. So it's interesting, but I think Collector's Glove kind of detracts from it a little bit, because I think it's kind of, I don't want to say it's a brain dead strat, because it is risky. There is a chance that if you're using that strat, you will not get the 12 you need, the 12 Basilosauruses, in the time before the Garliacthus window opens, which means you're going to lose time actually like trying to go for Garliacthus. But I think Collector's Glove and the Collector's Glove holding kind of makes it a little less exciting, a little less interesting. If you had to get 12 Basilosauruses and Basilosaurus wasn't a collectible, I think Garliacthus would probably be a tier 1, tier 2, right up there with me. At least for me, it would be up there with Snowy Paraxis. Now it's kind of like maybe B. If Snowy's an A tier, Garliacthus is mid to high B. Because of that, because it utilizes all these skills, it still rewards the knowledge, it's engaging, but Collector's Glove kind of pulls it back a little bit. I think the best way to address that without radically changing collectibles for Fisher, which they could do in Dawn Trail, just make it so that you don't either regen GP or your cooldowns pause when the collectibles window is up. I think either one of those, or ideally both, wouldn't hurt Stethocanthus. It wouldn't hurt the active Collector's holding, but it would still make Garliacthus a little bit more interesting. And now we move to sidereal whale. Sidereal whale is the second fish in the game to require 3 unique types of fish to trigger its intuition, specifically 1 Philania, 2 Unbegotten, and 3 EBE, like 8152 is it's the non-big fish version of the tentacle fish at Limne 3 beta. This one is a bit strange. I think it's fine. Like, I think sidereal whale is interesting. I think having multiple fish to trigger intuitions is great. I think that Unbegotten is a good choice for that because you're going to get them while going for Philania anyways. So it's a little bit of like a side jaunt there. So you do have a little bit of a reward, even if you don't get Philania. And I do think Philania is a bit of the issue on this one because it is relatively rare based on what we know from testing and just data that's been collected within the community. Philania has a roughly 1 in 5 chance of biting. Not 1 in 5, crap. You should be getting a Philania at worst every 5 windows. Is how I'm understanding that data. And I think that that's kind of an issue with sidereal whale. I think Philania is just rare enough that it is encouraging. I mean, it's like I'm making this sound like it's a possibility. It's actually happening. It encourages you to show up early to get Philania so that you can guarantee that intuition during the sidereal whale. And this is called whale jail for those who don't know. If you've heard the term and aren't sure what it was, it's called whale jail. You show up early, and sometimes people show up like 6 or 7 Philania windows early, which is like 6 or 7 hours before sidereal whale is open. Sometimes people go days ahead of time to just try and get a Philania to guarantee that intuition for sidereal whale. And I think the rarity of Philania is a big part as to why that happens. I also think that part of why it feels so rough sometimes, or it feels so rough for some folks to get Philania, to actually get whale, because both of them are mooched off Horizon events. I think some of it is a little bit of this knowledge issue. It's not conveyed very well, in my opinion, at least, and you can flame me in the comments for whatever you want for this. Philania, the way to optimize Philania is to optimize getting Horizon events. And the way to optimize using Horizon events, or getting Horizon events, is to optimize your timings and your GP usage. I see a lot of times when people are complaining or giving negative feedback about sidereal whale, a lot of it is, I'm always catching EBEs, I'm always catching Trainas, which to me is indicative of there's no optimization to get Horizon events. And I don't think the game, through its actions, or even just like through its quests or anything that you can do in game, has really trained players to know that that's a thing that you need to know. I don't think that there's a lot of resources, even within my own guides, and I know that this is a gap. We don't talk about that type of optimization a whole lot. I think if it was clearer that Horizon events were the key outside of just mooching, it was a whole lot clearer that, Horizon events, and you have to do everything you can, including using surface slap, using chum, using makeshift bait, I think if it was clear that that's what you had to do, you had to use those skills, and there were things before sidereal whale were added, activities like ways of doing it in ocean fishing, quests, more time like within the relic, side quests. I don't know. If there were more ways to show and teach the community, hey, here's how your skills work, and here's how you should be using them in conjunction with other fish, sidereal whale wouldn't be getting as much of the frustration that is being emitted by at least like North American and European English speaking players. I think there is a bit of a gap in the game on how your skills work. We have the tooltips, but I'm sure if you're listening to this still, we probably both know people don't really read the tooltips all that often, especially if it's a buff. They'll read the skill ones, but they may not read the actual buff or debuff. And I think there's a bit of a... I don't know how this would work. I think that there's a bit of a need for improvement on those in-game. Like when you're in like a patience, a lot of people still think you need you need patience to catch big fish. You don't. That's because the tooltip, the tooltip wasn't very clear until Endwalker, and even now it's not great, but it's better than it was. And it doesn't really teach you in game. It's just for catching larger sized fish, as in bigger fish of what you're already catching, not the big fish, not like Garliicthus or bobgoblin bass or pomegranate trout. Like, it's none of those. It's just catching larger fish. Like, you just catch bigger ones. I don't think that's made very clear, and I think sidereal whale... I've been back and forth on sidereal whale a whole lot. I think sidereal whale is a fine fish. I think it's interesting. I enjoy going for sidereal whale. I don't always really enjoy going for Falania. I think if you have the time and if you're in a state of life, I guess would be the word, where you don't feel like you necessarily have to jail a day or two ahead of time just to get a Falania because of work or other obligations, show up like just an hour before a whale window or to the whale window itself and just try and get a Falania that way. I think that's a whole lot more fun. I think that's a whole lot more interesting and can be a whole lot more engaging because it's a different way you'll approach it. But obviously, I respect that is not something that people can do, or sometimes that's things people are forced to do but they don't want to do. And that's a whole other conversation that I'm not going to get into in this because I've already been talking for over an hour just about Endwalker fish. I think that that's something that you should just try and do if you can, because I think you'll find it a little bit more fun, and it puts more focus on really wanting to learn or really needing to know how to optimize. And I think that when you get to that optimization stage of fishing, that's when a lot of fun comes in. Because we talk, when people talk about raids, they talk about optimized rotations. How do they optimize for a fight? How do they optimize their mitigations? It's the same thing with Fisher, just a little bit different. And if you think about each fish being like either a normal, an extreme, an unreal, or a savage, or even sometimes an ultimate like raid, and it is a solo duty with you as the fisher, and the fish that you want is the boss, and you look about it and you look at it in that perspective as an optimization, as like a puzzle or as like an optimization problem, a lot of these fish become a whole lot more interesting. And I know I've kind of really pivoted away from sidereal whale, so let me go back to what my thoughts on sidereal whale. I think is an okay fish. It's fine. I think it has really highlighted, or at least a lot of the frustration is coming from a lack of teaching, or I think it's an education problem, basically. I think that a lot of people don't know how to optimize Fisher. I don't think they necessarily know as much information as they think they need to know, because that's not necessarily always conveyed in game. And the the fish cord, my guides, Twitter, the Lodestone blog posts. A lot of people post fishing stuff on the official community blog post. YouTube, Tumblr, Blue Sky, whatever, doesn't have the reach that will reach a lot of these fishers. And I think if there's a way to be able to convey those things better in game, either through quests, through teaching, I don't know, tutorials, action help, I don't know. I just think that's something that we, well, I say we, but the game could do better. And I guess technically we as a community could do better as is educating other fishers. And I think that could be really, really helpful going into Dawn Trail, because we now have so many more people fishing. Not even just because it's the content lull and everyone's like, well, I have nothing else to do, time to go fish. I think we just generally have a whole lot more people fishing, even mid-expansion cycle. And I think there's a lot more eyes on Fisher. There's a lot more eyes on big fishing. And I think there just needs to be a little bit more of this is what this skill can do. This is how you can kind of combo prize catch with mooch. This is how you can use, surface slap and chum. How many times have I had to explain surface slap is only removed when you catch a fish. If you let the fish go, it doesn't go away. It just stays. Nothing happens. So you can chum and you can maintain it. And kind of just explaining all of this stuff, around that. So I think Endwalker fishing, in a nutshell, to kind of bring it back into a conclusion, I think Endwalker fishing was great for a casual fisher. If you were just getting started in fishing casually in Shadowbringers, Endwalker was probably fine for you. I think you would have probably enjoyed Endwalker fishing a whole lot. For people who are a little bit past casual, which again, I said it before, is a small percentage of a niche group, of a larger group, wasn't super challenging for us, wasn't super engaging. I know I spent a lot more time on alts catching older fish than on my main re-catching the fish that I had already caught for Endwalker. Because I just found the older fish, more fun and more engaging, because the new kit we got made those older fish a lot more interesting, or equally as interesting with the new approaches. Yeah, I guess that's kind of it. I've never been sure on how to end these types of things. But basically that's kind of my thoughts on Endwalker fishing in a nutshell, I guess. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the comments below, or tweet me, or ask me on Discord. Again, I'm excited for what's coming for Dawn Trail. I think if Yoshi P was talking about removing the stress-free part and adding stress back into the game, I'm hoping that gets added a little bit to fishing, and that we see that gradual increase of the earlier fish being more common, a little bit easier, and then as we progress, they get more and more intricate and more engaging. and I guess more and more stressful, but in a good way, moving through Dawn Trail. But I guess we'll find out here over the next few months how that's going to work. But again, if you've been listening this far, thank you very much for listening to me talk about fishing for going on almost an hour and 10 minutes now. And that's about it. So again, if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments or tweet me or Discord me. And I will talk to y'all later. Bye.